multiplication question. So, according to this question, you are given the cos graph, f of x equal to minus 2 cos x. Okay, obviously it has been drawn between 0 and 360 degrees. Right, the first question says write down the amplitude. Okay, now if you remember what I told you, there are two ways of finding the amplitude. You can get the amplitude from the equation. Okay, so the coefficient of cos x is negative 2, but amplitude is always positive. Okay, so you take the what? The negative. The answer here will be what? The 2. If you don't want to get the answer from the equation, then you must use the formula amplitude is equal to y max minus y minimum all over what? 2. Then you identify your minimum is what? Negative 2. Your maximum is positive 2. So this will be 2 minus 2 all over 2. You get 4 over 2, which is 2. Okay. Can you stop that? Generally, I encourage you to find the amplitude using this method, because you never make a mistake. Right? If you decide to get it from the equation, make sure you are aware that if the coefficient is negative, you take the positive of that negative value. Okay? Are you following that? Right? Then the next question says, write down the minimum value of f of x plus 3. Now, based on your understanding so far of functions in terms of translation, what does f of x plus 3 mean to you if you see that? What does it mean? Yes, Kane.
The value of f of x plus 3. Now, you see f of x on the top there.
Okay, it's correct the way you're saying. Is there another way you can explain in terms of in terms of vertical translation? Yes. Yes. So we are moving this graph here by 3 units. It's also the same as what he said. We are adding 3 to the y values. Okay? So this y, the y value is at the minimum here. You add 3 to it. You get a positive what? 1. And then if you add 3 to that 2 there, you get a what? A 5. Are you following that? So the minimum becomes positive 1 over here. The maximum becomes a positive 5 at the top. So the question is asking what is the minimum value? Now your minimum value, obviously you just add a positive 2, a positive 3 to this minus 2. And the answer would be what? Positive 1. So the answer is there. 1. Are you following? Yes. Remember, f of x is y. Don't forget that. F of x is what? It's y. So we just add the minimum value of this given graph. We add 3 to it. Okay? And you get what? The 1. That's all. Yes.
So in the test, the art question, you have to show any equation.
Okay, well, to be honest with you, number 1, you can just write the answer as I did. You get full marks. Because the mark allocation is 1 mark, here it's also 1 mark. But if you can't write the answer straight away from your head, then work it out. But you still get the same mark, which is a 1 mark. Okay? So either way, whether you show you're working out or you don't show you're working out, you will both get the same mark. Alright? Then the next question says, on the same system of x, draw the graph of g, where g of x is equal to sine x plus 1. So let's draw the graph of sine here. Right? Remember I told you that you can put this function in your calculator. Right? In my case, I'm going to do it mentally. So sine 0 gives me a 0 plus 1, I'll get a 1. So we're going to have our y-intercept there. Are you following that? Our y-intercept is going to be there. Then if you put, remember this is the sine graph. So we start at 0, then 90, 180, 270, then 360. So sine 90 gives me a 1. 1 plus 1, I'll get a 2. So when x is 90, y is going to be a 2. Then when x is 270, sorry, when x is 180, sine 180 gives you a 0. Okay? So 0 plus 1 will give you a 1. So you end up getting a point there. Okay, in your case, you can use your calculator. Okay, Don't try to do it as I'm doing it, because I've got an advantage of experience. Right? Then sine 270 will give you -1. Okay? So -1 plus 1 will give you 0. You can check that if you've got your calculator. How many of you have put this equation in the calculator? Okay, are you getting the value that I'm getting there?
Yes.
Then at 360, sine 360 will give you a 0. 0 plus 1 will give you a 1. So we'll put that. Then, if you want to sketch it, you start from here. So it will be like this. That's the graph of G of x. Okay, if I were to ask you, what's the amplitude of that? It will be what? A 1. Remember, the minimum is 0, the maximum is what? Is 2. 2 minus 0 gives you a 2, divide by 2 and get what? A 1. Also, the coefficient of sine x here is a what? It's a 1. Are you following that?
Yes.
Right. Then let's move on to the next page. Now, the next question says, use the graphs to determine the following. Well, you can use the graphs, but you can also use your calculator, but let's use the graphs. So, F180 means the value of y when x is 180. G180 means the value of y when x is 180, but that's for the sine graph. So we just have to go to x equals 180. So x equals 180. Remember, f is the faint one, right? The value of y there when x is 180. Let me use a different color there. So the value of y there, say what? 2. Am I right? The value of y when x is 180 for the cosine graph, y is equal to what? To 2. Then, for the sine graph, x is equal to 180. The value of y is a what? A 1. So, f 180 degrees minus g 180 degrees is going to be equal to 2 minus 1, which is a 1. Are you following that?
Yes.
Okay? Then the next question says, for which values of x will f of x times g of x be greater than 0? Remember yesterday how I explained this yesterday? Do you remember? Huh? Okay, so here, both the y values must be positive for us to get a value more than 0. Or they must be both negative in order to get a value of the product which is more than 0. So if you look at this graph here, okay, between 0 and 90 degrees, do you see that the y values for the cos graph, which is f, they are negative, but the y values for the sine graph, they are what? Positive. Between 0 and 90. Now, we don't want that interval. Because if you multiply a negative and a positive, you get what? A negative. You want a positive answer. Then, between 90 and 180, both graphs are above the x-axis, which means they are positive. So one of our solutions will be between 90 and what? And 180. But let's head on. Between 180 and 270, both graphs are also what? Positive. Which means our solution will be from 90 to 270. Between 90 and 270, both graphs are above the x-axis. Are you getting that? Huh? Are you following that? Huh? Okay. So our answer there to be between x equal to 90 degrees and 270. That's our solution. If you want, you can write this as 90. Write this x is an element, you put circular brackets, okay, between 90 and 270 degrees.
So why are you putting something in bracket?
because of this sign. It doesn't include an equal sign. If there was an equal sign, then we'll include the 90 and the 270. Are you following?
Yes.
Okay. Then, but you have got any question before I carry on? Alright, then the next question says, the graph of f is reflected about the x-axis and then move 3 units downwards to form the graph of h. Okay, so we are moving the graph of f, so we are reflecting f about the x-axis. What's the equation what's the general equation for reflection about the x-axis? If you move f, okay, in this case, since we have got two functions, f and g, it means our new function will be h of x. So h of x will be equal to what in terms of f? It will be what? It will be minus f of x plus. Okay, in this case, it will move 3 units down. So it will be f of x. Sorry, h of x is what? Minus h of x minus 3. That's the rule. Remember, I told you that this minus here tells you that you are dealing with reflection about the x-axis. Okay? But because the function is going to be moved by 3 units down, we'll put a minus 3 there. So all we have to do is substitute this where there is f of x. So we will get minus 2 cos x minus 3. Okay? We will get 2 cos x minus 3. So that's the equation. So the answer here, it will be h of x is equal to 2 cos x minus 3. Are you following? Huh? Okay. Then the last one says the range of h for the interval 0 to 360 degrees. So what will be the range of this graph? First, what's the minimum? Okay, let me just ask you, what's the minimum of 2 cos x? If you were to draw the graph of 2 cos x, what would be the minimum? Okay, just to give you a clue. Can you put this function, all of you please, put this function in your calculator. Remember your step is 90 degrees. Put the function in your calculator. Put the function in your calculator. You start at 0 degrees, you end at 360, your step is 90 degrees. Do that, please. Huh? To do what? So it means your minimum is going to be minus 5, your maximum is going to be negative 1. So when you write your range, it will be y, it's an element. We are starting from minus 5 all the way up to negative 1. Are you all seeing this on your calculator?
Yes.
Okay, so this question 6.5.2, to determine the range, you can just put the equation in the calculator and then identify your minimum and then what? Your maximum. And then you are done. Remember, we use the table to sketch the graph. But here we are not asked to sketch the graph. So you can work smartly by just finding the table, or rather finding the minimum and the maximum from the table on your calculator. Remember, range refers to the set of all the y values. You identify your minimum and your maximum. So the way we're writing range for the algebraic functions, it's exactly the same. You have to find your minimum and you also have to find your maximum. But for trigonometric graphs now, the minimum and the maximum are always included, especially for sine and what? Cos. Is that clear to everyone? Okay, let's carry on. Okay, so I'm done with that question. Okay, so first thing, in most cases you will be given the names of the functions and they will also be labeled. Okay, but for this question they were not labeled. You are supposed to determine yourself which one is the sine graph, which one is the cos graph. So here, if you know your cos graph, you find that this one here is a cos graph. So this one will be g of x. How do I know? Generally, the cosine graph, okay, starts on the y-axis. Okay, so it will have a maximum on the y-axis and a minimum to be in the fourth quadrant. Right? Then the second graph now, that will be the graph of f of x. How do I know? Now, the graph of f of x, okay, it's starting with a minimum turning point. Okay, which means the original graph was reflected about the x-axis because of this minus a. That minus tells us that the graph of sine x, okay, was reflected about the x-axis, and then it was moved by 1 unit what? Up. Okay, so determine the amplitude of both functions. Now, it's always better to just identify the maximum and the minimum, but you can also get them from the equations. So without wasting time, for f, okay, for f, the amplitude, yes?
So when I calculated the amplitude for f, so it gave me like a 2, right?
No, the amplitude is a 1.
So, but you calculated
The amplitude is a 1. So for f, okay, amplitude is equal to 1. Okay. What's the minimum? It's minus 1, and the maximum is what?
3.
3. So it will be 3 minus 1 all over 2. And that will give you, that will give us 8. So let's check it. Minimum is minus 1. Maximum is 3. So you end up getting a 4 over 2. You end up getting a 2. Okay. Which means there is a problem there. There's a problem with the equation. The equation is not matching with the graph. It's not true, then it's what?
The graph is saying
No, the amplitude is a 2. Okay, look here. The distance from minus 1 to 1 is what? The distance. What's the distance between 1 and minus 1? It's 2. What's the distance between 1 and 3? It's a 2. So the amplitude is a 2. But the graph does not indicate that there is a negative 2. Okay, which means there is a problem there. Okay? There is a problem. Okay? Which means this equation, it does not align with the graph it given. That's a problem. Right? So I think okay, in a so that's the correct equation. So the amplitude for f is a 2. That's the correct answer. Okay? The equation was not correct, so we have changed it to the correct equation. So the correct answer here should be 2. Okay? Then for G, okay, for G, let's just check. We have a minimum here, which is minus 3, maximum, which is 3. So the amplitude for G is equal to what? To 3. So G is correct. Only problem was the equation for f of x. Then the next question says, take the range of both functions. Okay? Now, to answer 6.2, let me go to the next page. Right? So 6.2 will say range of f What's the minimum? It's minus 1. So it should be x, so it should be y rather. Y is an element starting from minus 1 all the way up to 3. Then the range of G to the y is an element starting from negative 3 all the way up to 3. Okay. Isn't the lesson supposed to end at half past? Half past 2. No, there's no registration anymore.
There
is no, my understanding is that there is no more registration. That's my understanding. So we go on. No, you still have the mentality of the past, please. There's no registration now. There is no more registration. Okay. So allow me to carry on, please. Because tomorrow I don't want to talk about this. Right? Then for which values of x where x lies in 0 and 3, can I have your attention? Will f of x minus g of x be equal to 4? Right? How many of you can agree with me that if I'm to get a 4, f can be 4 and g can be 0? Do we have a case like that? No. If I'm to get a 4 here, f can be 3 but g can be minus 1. Do we have a scenario like that? Where f is 3 but g is minus 1? No, isn't it? But do we have a case where f is 1 and g is minus 3? Yeah. Huh? Yeah. Okay, where? Okay, so it's here. F is what? Minus 3 here. Okay, so g is minus 3 here and f is 1 here. What is 1 minus minus 3? 4. 4. So it means the answer here should now be x is equal to what? 180. How come I'm not talking to myself?
So would you like x to the element of 1?
Your answer would be x is equal to 180. That's the answer for 1. Is there any other possibility? I doubt so. Okay, then g of x minus f of x is equal to 2. Remember, to get a 2, either g of x is 1 and f of x is minus 1. We have a case like that. G of x is 1, it's here, and f of x is going to be a 1. It's not exactly 1, actually. It's close. It's 0. X equal to 0. X equal to 0. G is 3. And we have got a 1 there. So it will be 3 minus 1. Yes. That will give you 2. So it means x will be what? 0. Are you following? I know that some of you are tired. So when x is 0, then we can get that. Then
what point is there no place where you
okay, it's going to depend on where the y values will give you this number. Okay, here, this graph here, you see this, at 360, f is equal to 1, and g is equal to what? To 3. So we also have another solution there. So we say, oh, x is equal to what? 360. We have another solution. Okay? Is there another solution? I doubt so. Then f of x minus g of x equal to 3. F of x minus g of x equal to 3. Remember, to get a 3, f can be 2, g can be minus 1. We have a case like that, where f is 2 and then G is 1. We don't have a case like that. Or you can have F being a 1 and G being a negative 2. We have that. F being a 1 and G being a negative 2. 270 to be 3 minus 0. Yeah, that would work. So F means at 270. Okay, so X is equal to 270. Is there another point? Do you have another point? No. Okay, then I think that's the only answer.